Got my Cigar Dojo T-shirt from the Cigar Fest.
Yeah, you have to give us an update on how that was, Mike.
I will. I get an opportunity. It was quite the day.
Hello and welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome back to the Lightemap Lounge. It's Wednesday, time for another exciting show with another wonderful guest. Today is very special. Let's take a glimpse into the history of the modern cigar era. We have a gentleman with us who has shaped the destiny and the pathways of the premium cigar world for decades, entering the industry way before cigars became fashionable or let's say popular to an extent as we know it today. It is my pleasure and my privilege to welcome Philip Gregory Wynne with me today here. Philip, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for taking the time, doing us the honors, and spending this Wednesday afternoon together with us. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Philip, as I said in my brief little intro, you've been around for a while, even though you don't look like it, but you've been an icon of this industry for decades. The stories that you have to share, the people that you have worked with, and the projects that you have created are the fabric that legends are made of. However, you still have such a calm and considerate demeanor. Is that the result of life's colorful experiences, or are you just a natural temper?
No. I think the result is in the cigar. The cigar always lets you take a good gauging of yourself and your surroundings. So no matter how your ego tends to fly, all it takes is a day in the field or a day on the rolling floor to realize that you really don't know that much. So it's a great way to make one calmer with one's surroundings.
That's a very good point, and I realized that with the people in the industry, the true icons and the legends, they will always confess that the more experience you gain, the less you realize that you actually know, and the more you feel you still have to learn. Now, let's take a step back. Let's start at the very beginning, and maybe you can share a little bit of your illustrious cigar history together with us. You started smoking at the fair and young age of 16 when you grew up in Europe, if I remember correctly. What was changing about the world?
It was younger. My father was a U.S. diplomat, so I was living in Geneva at the time. My father was at the embassy there, at the mission to the United Nations. And Geneva, whoever has been knows it's kind of the mecca of cigar smokers. There's a lot of shops, and at that point, the main shop was Davidoff, and it was owned by Davidoff at the time himself. And I used to walk in front of that shop, and I was fascinated because Swiss they're great people, but they're a bit boring in everything that they do. But here you pass by the windows of this shop, and you saw different woods, different tobaccos, and it just grabbed your imagination. So I was dying to try a cigar. So I mustered up my courage one day, and I went into the shop and early in the morning, and Zino was there behind the counter, and I told him that I'd like to buy a cigar, and how much would it cost? What is his cheapest cigar? And he says, I'll tell you what, go next door, buy me a newspaper, bring it back, and I'll give you a cigar. So I went next door, got him a newspaper, brought him a cigar, and he gave me a Philippine cigar that was called Alhambra at the time. There was a Swedish cigar. There was a machine made that was wrapped probably with banana leaf. I got home, I smoked it. I threw up, And nevertheless, I came back the week later, and I started hanging out at the shop. And Zino was an extremely nice gentleman, and he had a store manager which had the name of Bora Fradkov, and both of these gentlemen were Russian Jews, and they both started their world in the tobacco business by making cigarettes in Geneva. And Lenin was actually a guest in their house before he was shipped back to Russia.
Oh, wow.
And Bora Fradkov's nephew was in school with me, so I had this connection with them. And I would just go there and hang out and listen to the stories and listen to Zino and see people come in and watch that. That was my first experience with the cigar world. Then I went back, I went to Rome and I graduated and I went to University of the United States. And there I was very unhappy of having left Europe, because that was all that I really knew. So my father told me that if he wanted to pay for my education, I had to study in the United States. So I came to the United States. And my father was living in Washington, D.C., in an area called where the Watergate apartment buildings were. And I was going to university in a place called American University, and I had no car, and it took me an hour to walk every day. And I used to walk by Georgetown, and there was Georgetown tobacco there. So I would buy a cigar, and my first cigar that I bought was a bundle cigar, was made by Fuente, it was Montesino and Royal Jamaicas. And I would buy the cigar, walk to school, attend school, and on my way back, smoke the cigar. So then I started, again, enjoying that world of cigars. Then I started working, I graduated, I worked a bit for the United States government. I worked selling helicopters for an Italian helicopter firm. I worked in the Middle East. And in 1989, the money was running out in the Middle East. There wasn't much money. And I looked for something to do. And I had worked in Central America when I was working with the government. And I decided to go into the cigar business. And I had the luck of knowing some Hondurans that introduced me to La Flor de Copan, which was a factory at that point, was independent, was owned by a gentleman by the name of Jorge Buesos, who is 101 years old and still alive and smokes every day. And I went and saw him. I bought into the factory as a minor shareholder, and I started making cigars. I started making my first brand, which was Petrus, in 1990.
Philip, well, first of all, I just came from my 101-year-old grandma. She literally lives next door, so I can sort of anticipate how that feels and how special that must be. What fascinates me is you seem to have had such a natural gravitation towards that whole. I hate the word lifestyle, but for the sake of argument, it kind of describes the essence of what I'm trying to get across. So that there must have been something very appealing to you about that whole ambience, the whole vibe, the whole atmosphere, and the experience that came not just purely with the savoring the cigar, but everything around it. And it's fascinating at such a young age that you kind of felt that and gravitated towards that. How come?
I was always, I traveled a lot in my prior profession, and I was always fascinated by the different parts and cultures of the world. But and since I was a cigar smoker and I enjoyed cigars so much, the whole process was very exciting to me. So as I started working with it and I started experiencing the growth cycles in the field, I started seeing the different areas where tobacco was grown and the variations of the tobacco. This overwhelmed me, and it really led me on this journey, which I'm very grateful for, because it's brought me from Honduras, I went to Nicaragua, Dominican, Costa Rica, Ecuador. And all of these countries are different, but they all, in the tobacco field, everything is similar. And the people that you're dealing with are all similar because we all have the same taste and the same passions. So it's a beautiful world. It's a much nobler and nicer world in the production side than it is obviously in the marketing and the sales side.
That's interesting. What made you realize that, or in which regard do you think there is this kind of division between the two elements of the industry?
Well, well, you have to divide it into growing and making cigars. But in both senses, you're dealing with people that are basically salaried employees. They live in areas where their salary is their main income, and they're happy with that. They have no other aspirations, and they love where they are. They love what they're doing, and so there's no egos involved. Everyone will help you in any way they can because you have a common denominator. Once you get into the sales and marketing, there's tons of egos involved. Money is involved. Everyone is trying to, say how great their product is compared to another's. I've noticed that in the past, people have downplayed other people, and it's a lot of it's the world. It's the real life. It's the more political side of the tobacco world, while the growing and the manufacturing is not. I can tell you that if I sit together with another manufacturer, we have no differences. We're on the same plate, and we both enjoy the same things.
Yeah. How different was it for you to get into the growing and manufacturing side? I mean, when you started so early on, nobody was there. I mean, when you went to Honduras, and when I say nobody was there, obviously the modern cigar era, as we now understand it, with a lot of brand owners, a lot of people from the US venturing into Nicaragua's, Honduras, the Dominican. Back in those days, it was rough still, right? And it
was rough. Honduras, basically, there was La Flor de Copan. There was a factory owned by what is now, I guess, Scandinavian tobacco, called Cofradia, which was making the Hoyos and Punch, which was run by the brother of Padron, a gentleman by the name of Estelo Padron. And in Danlí, there was Julio Eroa, and there was Nestor Plasencia that had a factory in Danlí and in Nicaragua. Nicaragua, I started in the 1990s. I was the first foreign investor into Nicaragua. And that was in 91, 92, and I built a factory in Condega. And at that point in Nicaragua, there was only Nestor and making cigars, and Nick Perdomo's father was there, and he had a box factory. And those were the only people at that time that were there. And so to go back to it, the field is a whole new world. The field is a universe, because when I started making cigars, I wanted to blend something similar to what I grew up smoking in Europe, which were Cuban cigars. So I was blending something stronger. United States was a market for mild cigars. The number one selling cigar in the United States in the 1960s was a Candela wrapper. Yeah. And then they went to Connecticut. No one knew what a full-bodied cigar was, and no one really cared what a full-bodied cigar was. Zino was the first, the Zino and the Mouton Cadet, which was a joint venture by Zino and the Rothschild factory, were the first premium cigars available on the market. And they were selling for $6 a cigar retail, which was unheard of at the time. I'm talking 90, 91. And but I saw that the potential to do different seed blends and varieties based on what I call the terroir, which is the soil, which, like, to compare it with wine, it was invariable, because you could blend seeds, you could use different types of variances, you could do different primings, and it opens up a world that's still going on today. And we've seen so much of that evolve. In Costa Rica, I'm growing a seed called Pelo de Oro, which the Cubans used to grow, which was the stable Cuban seed in the 1950s. But blue mold eradicated it, so they don't grow it anymore. But in Costa Rica, and there's growing some in Peru. Since it's below the air currents that carry the blue mold spore, we don't get affected by it. So there's all these varieties of tobaccos that have been dormant that now are using, and people are experimenting because people want to put their individuality on the product that they're making.
When you thinking back to those early days, how well connected were those few people that were already doing something in Honduras or later on in Nicaragua? Is it like today where the industry seems so closely connected and all these people interact and exchange a lot with each other? Or more like everybody on their own?
The Cuban expats were very connected. There was a group which would be Nestor Plasencia, Julio Eroa. There's a few other people. They were very connected because they were the diaspora, and their lives, so they all helped each other. The local, and they had the knowledge. They knew. The local Hondurans did not have the knowledge. They had to rely on the expertise of the Cubans and learn from them. And that gradually, well, it's now been over 30 years, they have acquired their knowledge. But in the beginning, the only people that really had that knowledge were the Cubans that were working there. Right. So they were very connected, but the Hondurans were nowhere the Nicaraguans.
And I mean, so some of the story, I read some of the early articles in Cigar Aficionado, and that wonderful interview that you had with them. Honestly, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but it must have been early 2000s probably. It's fascinating when back in those days you already recalled some of the early memories from the 90s and how things started. It clearly wasn't as romantic as well as many people might think back in those days, right?
Well, you know, here we are making cigars 90, 91, 92, 93, and everyone is making a living out of it, but there's nothing more. The people that are in there are there because there's a passion. They're not making any money out of it. No, there's a joke in the cigar industry. It says, how do you become a millionaire as a cigar maker? And the answer is very simple. You start with 2 million because you're going to lose 1. So, you know, everyone was losing money. Everyone was tight. Then Cigar Aficionado comes and the boom comes. And what happens? The boom was the best and the worst thing that could happen to the industry. Mm-hmm. The best because it gave everyone started realizing what a cigar was. Everyone wanted a cigar. There was a thirst for knowledge, but it only lasted 1 year. And in that year, anybody that could make a ring, a cigar label, and had a good idea, started making cigars. So all of a sudden, you brought in, I think by 97, we had 300 million cigars in the United States, of which probably 280 were unsmokable, 280 million with unfermented tobaccos. So for the people to go through all of those inventories, to stable out things and to clean it up took a while. But in the end, it made whoever stayed, you know, took a serious approach to cigar making, and a lot of the other brands that started right after the boom, which was probably like La Flor Dominicana, a few others, you know, they're around today because they put their hard work and effort into it, and they created a brand. But a lot of people have gone by the wayside, as you imagine. There was I can't imagine how many people have come to me over the years and say, I want to make a cigar, and they think it's like mixing paint. They don't realize what goes beyond making the cigar. That every cigar manufacturer makes a cigar with tobacco that we're going to use 3 years from now. So we have no idea what the market's going to be 3 years from now. So if all of a sudden I start fermenting hundreds of thousands of tons of tobacco based on my sale, a phenomenal sale of 97, which is what happened to many of us, and the next year comes down and no one wants a cigar, now where are you? You know, so it's a lot of effort went into managing to stay healthy and to stay alive.
When you look at things today, though, it sometimes feels as if there's still plenty of entrepreneurs who believe it literally is as simple as you described.
Unfortunately.
Paint and there you go. Here's your cigar brand.
But they're short-lived. All of them are short-lived. They all follow the same mistake. They're all short-lived. It's like, there's a lot of paragons between cigars and the wine industry. I mean, tomorrow you can come up with the best label design and a nice bottle of wine, but if you don't have the grapes, if you don't have the vineyard, and you don't have the experience to produce it, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a good wine. So one side is marketing and one side is production. So it's when the two meet and find a happy medium that you have a successful brand. And even the successful brands have variations. Because if you're too successful, you can't get enough tobacco to maintain that blend. So it's very hard to have the continuity of that blend. If you're now starting to make if you were making 2 million, 3 million, 4 million cigars a year to 25 million, it's very difficult because you don't have the source.
From your experience and a lot of these players that you have seen come and go, do you think there is like a magic threshold or a certain number where as a manufacturer you're at a sweet spot and above that it becomes like super challenging to maintain the quality? Or is there a point after which it has to go south?
It depends on each individual. The best advice that I received was at the border crossing between Honduras and Nicaragua from Padron. We were sitting there waiting to cross the border, and this was must have been 94. I just started operations in Nicaragua. And he told me, he says, find your number, whatever your number is, 1 million cigars, 2 million cigars, 5 million cigars. Stick to your number. In a good year, you sell them well. In a bad year, you don't. But that's your number. So you can program yourself to the tobacco that you need so that you can always know that you can make 5 million cigars or 1 million, whatever your number is. But where the problem is where it becomes erratic, where I've had clients that come to me say, I want 150,000 cigars. And you make him 150,000 cigars, and 6 months later, he's gone. So I bought him tobacco for 3 years worth for him. I've hired more rollers. I've created an infrastructure to support that brand. Doesn't work. So that's where, to answer your question, each manufacturer, depending on his personal sales model, has to find that number. And I think the most successful ones do. They know that number. They don't produce more.
You created Felipe Gregorio at some point and kind of Latinized yourself a little bit to create the storyline around your cigars back in those early days. Many people from many different backgrounds tried to enter the cigar industry. In retrospect, do you think that like putting on the guayabera and wearing a Panama hat, is that still considered like an easy access to the cigar world? Obviously for you, it was very, very different. And you have so successfully ventured those countries with truth and honesty and in your approach and your intent. But do you share that feeling sometimes?
Well, I the ones that can wear it, that they have a family history, God bless them, because they have that. It's like being the French vineyard maker that's been in the family for generations. But there is no point me going to France and putting on a French accent and saying I'm making the best wine. And that's how I view, that's how I view the people that try. I mean, you have to be true, because the consumer knows that. The consumer won't buy into marketing, into media. I can't say I've been 10 generations of people making tobacco and then I haven't. I would be a fraud to myself and to the consumer. So it didn't work out well for me in the beginning, because I was competing against the people that had more of a credible profile than I did. But then Zino made it, like I said, Zino was a Russian Jew, and look where he is. Look what he had done with the brand. Ernest Schneider, which owned Ottinger, which bought him, made it, and he was a Swiss Army captain, and he never claimed to be have Cuban blood. So you have to be true. Once you're true and you make the best that you can, I don't think people put much importance to that. At least I hope so.
This might be an odd question, but with your answer, you just kind of triggered it. Do you have a certain place where you truly feel at home, or where you feel at ease the most?
In the tobacco field, wherever in the world. But besides that, I'm in no man's land. I'm an American, but I'm of a European background. My mother was Italian. I lived most of my life in Europe, my early life, and now I live between Miami and Dominican Republic. And so I really don't feel it. I feel at home everywhere and not at home anywhere.
Which I think is a great thing on the one hand. It probably has certain negative connotations as well. Might be, I don't know, but I also always say that I consider myself a true cosmopolitan, and it's wonderful if you can make so many experiences and see so many different places on earth, meet different people, experience different cultures. It all makes who we are in the sum of all of it, right?
That's true.
In the early days, you bought tobacco from Omar Ortiz, I believe, right? And then he wanted to put up a factory in Condega together with you.
Yes.
How was it working with him in the early days? Do you still have like strong ties with the family and their factory?
I'm still a shareholder of the factory. Omar was a supplier of La Flor de Copan.
Mm-hmm.
We used to buy tobacco from him. And when the first Sandinista government fell, and the government of Violeta Chamorro came in, he asked us to invest and to start a factory in Nicaragua. We started the Condega factory, and the owners were Omar Ortiz, La Flor de Copan, which then was sold to Consolidated, which was then sold to Tabacalera and to Altadis, and myself. I have very good relations with Omar. He's a very good friend. We know each other for so many years. But when Daniel Ortega was reelected in Nicaragua, on a personal political note, I wasn't in agreement with that. And I pulled out of Nicaragua. And I said so at the time, and I was criticized a lot. And this is just my convictions. I felt that Nicaragua was going to go south, and I still believe it will go south, personally, even though it's producing most of the cigars of the world now and a lot of the tobacco. I just think that the political regime that's there it is not good news.
Mm. When you compare Honduras, Nicaragua, DR, I love the fact that you mentioned terroir earlier. You've experienced all the manufacturing countries from various different angles and perspectives, and you were heavily involved with different factories in various countries. What for you makes the unique characteristics or the essence of terroir in general, but also in particular for those manufacturing countries? Where do you gravitate towards?
The soil, the location, the type of the altitude where it's grown, the soil, the microclimate that exists, and but mainly it's the topsoil that is very, very important. Some are more volcanic, some are more we call it in Spanish, it's called franco arenoso, more sandy. So the soils influence a lot, and also the availability to the water, whether the water is deep down in the soil or the water or needs irrigation. All of that affects what a terroir is. Also, what is grown around it. the types of the plants and the crops that are grown around it. If it's a coffee producing region, if it's cacao, if it's other things, then that affects it too.
In which regards, or where particularly do you get those individual notes then?
You get those, well, you get those notes from the soil, but you can get the soil has been used before for other crops. So
Right.
there's always remnants of what has been grown before there. So that's the notes that you pick up, that you can pick up in some of the tobacco.
Very interesting.
And then the fermentation process is the other part that's very important, obviously.
So you might also get a slight effect of that with simply rotating crops that you use in your fields in general, right?
Yes, yes.
How do you feel about the individual and unique characteristics of the various manufacturing countries that you've been involved with?
Well, they all bring something to the table that is a plus. Dominican doesn't produce good wrapper, but it produces amazing filler. And Nicaragua produces both. Honduras produces both, but the filler, the wrapper that it has, it tends to be more veiny and more full body. Mexico produces not so good filler, but amazing wrapper. So, and Ecuador produces only wrapper. So all of them bring something to the table. But going back to that other question, think about, everything is done by pollination, right? So if your tobacco crop is next to a field of an orange grove or papaya or pineapple, when the bees pollinate your flowers, they're leaving something that they've picked up from another field. So that's where you're getting all of these unknown and unquantified flavors in the tobacco that till this day we can't figure it out. But that's one of the most fascinating aspects of the growing cycle too.
Mm-hmm. Those are the little nuances that a simple marketing term or some of the modern Sprech that you will find in cigar reviews probably does not always shine through or come through, right?
Right. Well, they stick on they always stick on the basics because I think it's easier. It also depends how much knowledge do you want? How much knowledge is the public willing to listen to, or how often do they tune off? They get bored. Now, if they want a lot of knowledge, it's out there. But most people don't want it. They want the condensed version. So, and then with the cigar smokers, as long as they like the cigar, they're happy with that.
Mm. Do you think that has changed over the years? Or
I think the public is much more educated now, much more educated. Before I started, no one knew what a ligero was. No one knew what a visa was. No one would know the different tobacco zones. I'm sure each one of these gentlemen know what a Nicaraguan, Dominican, Ecuadorian tobacco is, but no one would have known that in the past. They have no idea. They wouldn't even know the difference whether tobacco was made from blonde tobaccos that make cigarettes to dark tobaccos that make. They wouldn't know that tobacco was tobacco. So the consumer has really educated himself thanks to people like you, thanks to publications, thanks to books, and they found out a lot. And that puts the emphasis on us to make a better cigar too.
That was my follow-up question, where I'm curious as to how does that in reverse then affect the industry and the people who have to rethink not only their manufacturing operations, but also the way that they communicate and get their message across.
Well, I can't speak for the others, but for me, I tend to see that the attention span nowadays, in general, in life in general, not in our particular field, is shorter. So people always want to try something new. People always want to know something else. They before again making a paragon with the wines or with whiskeys and bourbon. Before there were 2 bourbons. Now how many bourbons are there? There was 2 whiskeys. Now how many whiskeys there are? Because people want to try. and people are knowing. So for me as a manufacturer, I have to always be ahead of the game. I have to say, let me make something that will give a new taste profile to a cigar, so they are interested in trying it. That's how it works on the reverse for me.
Speaking of that, how do you nowadays approach the creation process of your cigars, whether that's keeping a consistent profile on an old line, but more so, I guess, with creating a new line or coming up with a new vision of a cigar that you want to produce? Is it something that you purely do out of your own intent and whatever you want to achieve and whatever you want to enjoy, the cigar that you want to see and that you want to smoke? Or do you have a specific idea of what the customer would love to see and enjoy? Or is it a mix of both?
In all reality, I have no idea what the customer wants. I don't, to be honest with you. I have no idea, because that could change. What makes me do the different blends, it's the tobacco that speaks to you. So if I get a priming, if I get something amazing and I say, wow, this is something that's unique, then it's going to inspire me to make a cigar out of that. But if I get something mediocre, which doesn't mean it's bad, but it's stable, then it's not going to inspire me to make something that's different.
And then there's also certain cases where people come to you, as you described, and they ask for something. How is that different, or how do you approach such projects when somebody approaches you and be like, I want to make a cigar?
I always tell them, as a manufacturer, I say, give me the smallest order you possibly can, but give me continuity. Mm-hmm. So I prefer to make 1,000 cigars a month for you, but I'd like to work with you for 3 years, because this way I can guarantee that every cigar will have the same tobacco, that the same rollers will be making the same cigar. I've been burnt earlier on, and I'm not interested in big orders, in big numbers, because I don't believe that they can be sustained. Some of my customers will come with a particular taste profile that they like, and then I will blend them cigars according to that taste profile, and I'll let them be involved in the selecting process, and they can pick whatever they like, and will fine tune it to a cigar that they want. Others will leave it up to me, and they say, I'm looking for a taste strength profile mainly, not a taste profile. I want something mild to medium. I want something with that type of wrapper, and that's how we work.
First of all, I would like to thank everybody who's joining us today. There's quite many people watching on Facebook, amongst them Aliki, one of our dear ambassadors. Sanj Patel is joining us, and Philip Sanj is sending his very best wishes and greetings to you. So I shall forward that from him. Also, if you have any questions, for those of you joining us on Facebook, then please put them into the comment section. I'm always watching and following, so if I can share any of your questions with Philip here, we'll do so with great pleasure. Now, speaking of certain private label projects, one of the gentlemen that approached you, even though not personally, but through an intermediary, was a certain Frank Sinatra.
He approached me personally. I mean, he came to me with an intermediary, but he was involved in the process.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that story.
This was during the cigar boom, and Frank Sinatra had made a deal with Southern Wine and Spirits, which is a big alcohol distributor here in the United States. And they were going to distribute his cigars and pay him a royalty. His royalty was more than I was getting paid for. So they put in an order in, and I met with him 3 times to talk about cigars, and maybe a total of 10 times. The first time, my mother's Sicilian, so he asked around, are there any Sicilian tobacco makers? There's no Sicilian cigar makers, but Philip's mom's Sicilian. Let me talk to this kid. So I go and meet him, and he says, "Okay, I want you to make a cigar for me." And I said, "All right." And he says, "It's got to be a very good cigar, and we're going to sell it through. We're going to distribute it. It's going to have my name on it. I'm going to use as the ring, the cigar ring, my signet ring, the ring that I wear on my finger. And so I'd like you to make it." So I said, "It's an honor." So then, as I was leaving that first meeting, he goes, I'm standing up, about to leave. I said goodbye. He says, "By the way," he says, "the cigar has to be made in the Dominican Republic because no one's going to want a cigar made in a banana republic like Honduras." And I said, I don't have a factory in Honduras. He says, I said, "I don't have a factory in the Dominican Republic." He says, "Now you do." He says, "How much will it cost?" So I made a calculation. I gave him a figure on the top of my head. He says, how do you want it? You want a check or a wire transfer?" And I said, "You don't want a contract?" He says, "Kid, I know where you live." That was it. That was Frank. So then I said, "I'll start bringing you samples." And he says to me, "Don't bring me any samples. Just make the best damn cigar you can and put my name on it." That was the end of the story.
Unbelievable.
So
Sanj actually just commented that he still has a few boxes of Frank Sinatra cigars left.
yeah, they're a rarity because after he died, the family started fighting. I think his wife and one of his daughters sided. So the trademarks for that are all, they're in court. So we stopped producing, I don't know, 97, 98. There's no more. I mean, we don't make those cigars anymore.
But what a special moment that sort of immediately got you kickstarted with that project.
Yes, but besides that, he was a very noble person. He was tough, but then he said to me, he says, "Put your name on the box." I wasn't going to do that. He said, "Frank Sinatra by Philip Gregory. Put your name on the box. You're making the cigar. Share the space with me." So I mean, a lot of people of his star level would have never done that, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very good point. How do you think in general that connection and that project changed your path with premium cigars?
Well, it changed my path because I opened a factory in the Dominican, and then I bought land and I built a building, and then the boom ended, and Southern Wine and Spirits didn't buy any more Frank Sinatra cigars, and here I was with an empty factory with so much tobacco, with this, and indebted up to my where, and then another incredible gentleman in the cigar industry that has since passed, Bob Franzblau, which owned Thompson Cigars, came to me and he says, "Philip, I'll give you a hand, make me some of my product, obviously lower price point cigars." And I had a brand called Iguana, which was the first Candela wrapper cigar that was reintroduced in the States, which I couldn't sell for the life of me. And he says, "I'll take it." And it became his #1 selling brand. So that gave me a jump start. But I had a tough 2 years after the boom ended when Sinatra left the scene.
I can imagine. Was there ever a point where you felt like we made it now, we're past that critical point? Or do you think as an entrepreneur you never really have that?
You never really are. You never really are. Never really are. Always something could happen anywhere along the line. Especially with all of these tax issues that we're facing in the United States and things of that nature, so you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Over the course of the years, how do you feel that the operation side and the manufacturing component, in particular with your view on the factory, have changed? Or have they not changed?
I'm making small, I've stopped making a mass market cigars as of 6 to 7 years ago, and I'm making more limited runs and not with volumes. I don't make any cigar. I don't make more than 600,000 of any cigar, but most of my cigars are within the 100,000 stick range.
That is also an observation that came up recently, in particular during this year's PCA, that a lot of the media representative, but also brand owners and manufacturers shared that there seems to be a growing number of limited editions or limited runs, rather than particular focus and emphasis on the old and the traditional and the core lines. Yes, obviously it's probably easier to sell a short limited production run. You tidy it up, you pretty it up with a nice marketing story, and then you sell through the whole lot and look for what's next, what's new, and that seems to be a very common question amongst consumers as well. Is that something that you see reflected on your operations and
Yes.
manufacturing side as well?
Yes, of course, 100%. Remember that I'm a small operation, so I don't have a brand that can sustain a 15 million cigars a year production. If I could, it would be different. I would be pushing my main line, but I can't. So in order to make the best possible cigar that I can, and in order to survive economically, I have to go that route.
Is it something that you personally enjoy, though?
I think it's better. I enjoy much more because, like I said, it gives me the ability to experiment with different tobaccos and to keep my thinking cap on and to try always something new. So for me, it's stimulating.
And I guess also for your personal enjoyment, then you like to try a lot of different things and change things up.
Yes, a lot. I'm always trying to figure out something different. Next year we'll be coming out with something completely different on some tobacco that I'm blending. But I mean, yes, for me it's not a job. It's pleasure. It's pure pleasure. So I can go to work every day and say, I love what I'm doing, and I'm blessed and really blessed. I have 30 years in this industry, over 30 years in this industry, and I'm blessed.
What else could we ask for? Huh? We had a question from Mace. Mace, buddy, you raised your hand. Please chime in and bring it up.
Thank you very much. Great session again, Philip. Great to meet you. Great to hear your stories. Absolutely amazing hearing, especially about the Sinatra situation. I guess I had a question, sort of a couple of questions. One is probably starting more on, you mentioned at the very beginning that you don't see yourself with other sort of producers and manufacturers. You don't see any, you're all the same. And I'm just wondering, is that the reality in terms of when you started? Do you still see it as the same now? Do you still feel that everyone at that level is kind of working towards the same goals, or it's kind of changing and evolving as the industry grows and as the times change, cost of living issues? Surely it can't stay the same, right? That's kind of the first question. Then I guess I can let you sort of chime in on that.
Okay. Remember that if you look at the marketing, everyone's a cigar maker. All the brands, they're all cigar makers. In reality, there are not that many cigar makers. A lot of these people say that there are cigar makers are having their cigars made by somebody. So the core group of cigar makers that are in business, that have been around for years, we all know each other and we all respect each other. And we all have admiration for each other. And I can't tell you the times where I am short a bale of tobacco. I will call up one of my competitors. I say, do you have this? And he says, sure, pick it up. Or vice versa. Or I need some molds, vice versa. We have no, we work very close to each other and we respect each other. Now, when it comes to people that are blowing their own horn and saying that they're manufacturers and all that I can't tell you because I don't know them, because I don't know who's making their cigars. And I can't elaborate on that.
Great answer. Okay, that helps clarify it. I guess the other one's more of a fun question when you were dealing with Frank Sinatra and trying to gauge how much of a smoker he was and how much input did he have. Was it just a case of, listen, I trust you, get out there and just make it the best cigar you can, Or was there a bit more input in terms of sort of the flavor profile he wanted, what kind of a cigar he wanted?
No,
No?
no input. He was a cigarette smoker.
Okay. That's
He
what
was
I
a
thought.
cigarette
I knew he
smoker.
was a cigarette smoker. Yeah, that's what I
And
thought.
he told me that he used to have a huge, he said all his friends wanted Cuban cigars, and he used to bring them inside the speakers of his concert when he used to go on tournée. He'd fill up the empty boxes full of Cuban cigars, the speaker boxes, and bring in I don't know how many illegal Cubans into the United States and hand them out to all the people that he either wanted to make happy or had asked him for a favor. But I mean, he didn't care. He really didn't care. I mean, he was in there. I think he liked the idea to have his name on the box. He liked his idea of the cigar. He liked the whole image of the cliquish image of the cigar community. But he didn't care.
Great answer. I didn't think he would, so I knew he was a cigarette smoker. So that's kind of what I thought. I guess the final bit here, just again, sort of leaning on that fun side of things. Two aspects. If you were looking at the celeb scene as it was now, right, as Frank was back then, and challenging yourself, if you were looking at it, if you could pick somebody that you could work with on that same sort of level that you did with Frank, who might that be? And also, I guess, what kind of challenge would you want to give yourself in terms of potentially, where you're getting certain leaves from, or certain wrappers, certain fillers, to try and challenge yourself? So kind of two questions in one there.
I mean, it's not a question that's going to help my business, but I'll tell you that I don't think any celebrity sells a cigar, because whoever's a cigar smoker wants to smoke a good cigar. The fact that it has someone's name on it is not going to push the sale. It's going to push the sale to someone that doesn't really know about cigars. The people that smoke Sinatra cigars maybe were the mafia wannabes or the Italo-Americans that liked his name or grew up listening to his music and say, hey, I'll buy a box of that. But they weren't really cigar smokers in all reality. So for me to tell you, it would have to be a cigar smoker. I don't know who's out there, but I know that going back in time, Hamilton did a cigar, and he did his version of an H. Upmann cigar, George Hamilton, the actor. And that didn't work either, because no one was going to pay $1 more for an H. Upmann because it has George Hamilton's name on it. So because it's the Upmann that sells, it's not the Hamilton. And it's going to be the same with any star, in my opinion. And it's just like the people that market it, that are trying to market it with sex, by putting a pretty girl on there. I don't think that doesn't, you're not going to buy a cigar if you see a beautiful girl on the box. You'll like it, but I mean, you're going to buy what you think's good, and you're going to buy it from someone that knows his stuff, So that's what I think the realities are.
Yeah, I fully agree. I don't think any real cigar smoker is going to be, and I guess that kind of ties into, I guess, the whole, the branding and how box designs are sort of changing and evolving. I think you're absolutely right in that. A real smoker, a purist, just wants the best tobacco. They want the best cigar, and it being associated with, Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lewis Hamilton, it won't matter a single bit. It might introduce a new market, a new audience to
Maybe,
cigars.
you're right. It might introduce with a younger star, like maybe a Lewis Hamilton. Well, I don't think Lewis will do it because
he's too healthy.
He doesn't need it, and I think he's also probably too eco-friendly to want to grow tobacco. But I'm saying maybe some new rappers or something could get a group of people involved in a cigar. But then how long are they going to be involved in?
Exactly.
We're all getting older. We're all getting older, right? So I mean, I don't know how you're going to see a rapper in his 70s trying to push his cigar still. I don't think it works. So
great stuff. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thanks, man.
Brian, over to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So yeah, this is fascinating. I love this. Literally, the moment Reinhard asked the question, I was listening to Sinatra at that exact moment. And it's a big playlist with a lot of artists, so that's a big coincidence. That was blew my mind. If my face is red, it's because it's going to be 100. It's not 103 now, but it's going to be 103 degrees today. There's the gardeners. So I'm curious. I always like the names of brands and the stories behind it. And I could look it up online, but since I've got you, it'll be great just to ask and hear it from you. So the name, it's just a different, is it Philip spelled differently? And what's the meaning of the name of the brand? And also, why iguana back in the day?
Okay, now my first two names are Philip Gregory Wynne. So when I started, I wanted to Latinize myself. So Philip in Spanish is Felipe and Gregorio is Gregory. So that's what I call the name. My first brand was Petrus. And then I realized early on that in order to, people want to see a face behind the product. And I had to give my face. So that's what I did. Iguana, the name Iguana was because I was using Candela wrapper and iguanas are green. And they are inherent to the tropics. So they're full of iguanas in Dominican, Nicaragua, Honduras, and all of those places. So that's why I called it.
Cool. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Philip, you also have, and you mentioned earlier, Pelo de Oro and your experience in Costa Rica. You had a very special relationship with that country and a lot of impact in, I would also say that the general appreciation and awareness around Costa Rican tobacco and cigars being manufactured there. What was your first encounter with Costa Rica? And how did you ultimately sort of enlarge in your experiences there? What was it like? How was it different compared to what you had experienced before that as well?
There was an Italian gentleman that had invested in some land in Costa Rica, and he had hired a gentleman by the name of John Vogel, who is a Nicaraguan that used to run Consolidated Cigars Genetics Laboratory. And John Vogel was doing experiments with different seeds that he had from the Consolidated Bank there, and he was growing them in Costa Rica. I tried some of that tobacco and I liked it, and I bought tobacco from him. So that's how my first experience with Costa Rican cigars. Back in the day, I remember Tony Borhani was making cigars, and CAO were both making cigars out of one factory in Costa Rica that no longer exists. It was owned by an American gentleman named Doug. But I had never had any dealings with him. So that's what it is. So then I went to Costa Rica and I invested in some property there, and I started growing these altitude tobacco. What I like a lot about it is because we don't have a lot of bug infestation because of the altitude, and it rains every day, and we grow on pretty steep inclines, so the drainage is good. So the tobacco is a terroir. It's unique. The tobacco that's coming out of there is good, but we can't produce a lot of it, and so that's why my fascination with the country. Plus their whole philosophy towards ecotourism and all of that. I feel that they're doing a very good job, and the fact that they have politically they're very stable. And they have no army, and they don't have the corruption that is in the other countries. So I enjoy them, and I enjoy the country.
With everything that's going on in the cigar industry now, with in particular shortages, challenges in supply and demand, and making ends meet, do you think that the industry will look into unexplored territories or certain countries that have probably been abandoned? So
the same thing as wine. In 1990s, whoever thought that New Zealand would make one of the best white wines in the world, or Australia, or Chile? I mean, the same thing's going to happen with tobacco, except that tobacco is grown in much smaller areas of the world. But you're going to see, especially with the development of Africa, the strain of Cameroon tobacco, Central African Republic. There's a lot of countries that could produce pretty good tobacco there. They're already, Africa produces a lot of tobacco. A lot of it is blonde tobacco. Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia produce tobacco. So I do see that where I see it growing is I see it growing in the African continent. And now, like I mentioned to you, Peru is growing pelo de oro. Peru has never grown tobacco traditionally in the past. It's starting to grow. I heard that some people are doing some tobacco in Panama. So I do see that that's going to be definitely the future.
Purely in terms of tobacco growing operations, or also when it comes to manufacturing and setting up the factories?
I think tobacco growing in the beginning, because the skill of the manufacturing is going to be, it's a hard skill to it. The Chinese, as you know, are the number one consumer of cigars in the world. And they have tried hard with their Great Wall, and they've bought all the tobacco from Indonesia, and they've tried to roll, but they haven't been successful. And that's an example. You can throw a lot of money in this industry, but if you don't have the know-how, and you have to get the people that have the know-how, then it's going to be very hard to succeed.
Great point. Ian.
Thank you. Hi, Philip. Great to meet you. I'm really enjoying this conversation. A few questions. I was reading up about you, and I think you said that you did your 30-year anniversary cigar, which I think small batch still have. So I want to try and get a few of those when I'm in the States in a few weeks' time. But you said earlier on that it's the topsoil that was important, and I think Hurricane Mitch had sort of wiped away a lot of topsoil. I'd always understood that it's the lower soil because the roots go down lower. Can you sort of say a bit more about that?
The roots have in their networks of roots. There's a number of roots. There's two main roots that go down and search for the water. But the topsoil, usually the topsoil level is close to 2 to 3 meters in fertile grounds. So there you have a lot of the bulk of the roots of the plant that are getting the nutrients from that topsoil.
Okay, so and I think you said that because of that Hurricane Mitch, that the topsoil had been lost, and therefore the cigars have changed completely. And so, what have we lost? The
taste profile. The taste profile. That area that in particular I talked about is an area it's called Copan Ruinas. It's by the Copan Valley in Honduras. And that area was hard hit by Mitch. And the topsoil was washed away. And now the few farms that were making that tobacco no longer are growing tobacco there. So that not only is the topsoil gone, but it has not proved to be economically viable for them to grow tobacco. So that tobacco is gone. I don't know how long you've been smoking cigars, but that was the tobacco that I used. Did you ever hear of a cigar called Don Melo Centenario? It was back in the 90s. This was the first cigar, full-bodied cigar that I made, and it was made with that tobacco. And we had made 300,000 cigars, and we did extremely well with it, and everyone wanted it. And it was right after the boom, and that was the particular strain of tobacco that we used. And I had saved a couple of bales of that, and that's my anniversary cigar.
And it's a fun question. If you were cast away on a desert island, but you could take some cigars with you, perhaps 3 or 5 different brands, which was all you could smoke, perhaps excluding your own, what would you take with you? What are your favorite cigars?
Definitely one that keeps on reproducing. But let me think. I'm a fan. I like Bolivar, the Cuban Bolivar, very much. I like Ramon Alones. And then of the non-Cuban brands, I would probably Ernesto cigars, and I like the Davidoff Nicaragua. I think it's a very good cigar too. I'd probably take that too. So.
Thank you.
Philip, what's fascinating is the depth of knowledge and experience that you have to share. Even though, as I said at the beginning, you were, and I'm not saying this judgmentally, or if so, then only positively. But you seem to be more of a behind the scenes gentleman of the cigar industry, or let's put it that way, not as loud as some of the other manufacturers and brand owners out there. You're a wealth of knowledge, and it's fascinating to listen to you and hear those stories. If you look at the cigar industry today from a bit of a meta perspective, you are very respectful towards the other manufacturers and the industry and how people stick together, support each other. But what are some of the challenges that you see, and what is your perspective on the bigger picture overall? Also looking ahead into the next couple of months and 2 to 3 years.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is the multinationalization of the big companies that are growing and buying a lot of the small brands, because there you now have employees that don't necessarily have a tobacco knowledge, but they have other knowledges like marketing skills, accounting, human resources that are involved in a product that needs experience. And so I think that's the biggest challenge. The bigger these multinational companies become, the less you're going to see a downward turn in the quality of cigars, in my opinion. But thank God we have a lot of people would consider them medium range companies, but they're actually big, like the Fuentes, the Padrones, that are family-owned companies, that they are here to stay. So they will always make a quality product because they are hands-on. So hands-on has to be the way this industry is to survive. If you're hands-off, you're not going to get a good product, in my opinion.
So based on all this, what can we learn from the past, or with all the experience that you have, what are some of the things that you would love to see in the industry to change, or for people to realize that this is something we forgot and we should probably look back towards?
Well, I think that one, because of my penchant towards the appreciation of where the tobacco comes from and the soils, and to look at a broader political, economic window. We are now in the United States. We're facing all of this immigration issues. But if money was given to these people, these countries, and the corruption wasn't there, that they could invest more in the fields, invest more in a skill, it's going to make a better world for everybody, because nobody wants to leave his home to have to work somewhere else. Nobody wants that. And they want to stay where they are. And they love where they're coming from, but they just don't have the economic ability to do that. So I think it's very important that somehow we manage to give back, to grow the industries in the countries where cigars are made. It's very important. I'm seeing all the time that, let's say, let me give you an example. In the Dominican Republic, it's probably easier because it's more affluent. You have a lot of trade-free zones. So there's trade-free zones that are making jeans, Levi's jeans, or they're making Timberland boots. And then you have tobacco factories. So the traditional tabaqueros that we trained, that roll, that have made their life, and their father and their grandfather probably were tobacco rollers. The kids are saying, well, they're offering me $5 more to sew a pair of jeans at this duty-free area. He's not going to go and work for us anymore. And there we've lost the future, because it takes a long time to train somebody. It takes a long time. So that's very important. It's an education of a process. The consumers don't realize that because they smoke the finished product, and a lot of the marketing aspects, they don't care about that because they want their top dollar. They don't care where they're buying their cigar. But it goes back to the fundamentals. If you don't give back and you don't help where the product is coming from, you're ultimately going to lose. On my first trip in the Dominican, Reinhard, you've been to the Dominican?
Yes.
Have you ever been to Camp David in Santiago? It's a restaurant on a hill.
Mm-hmm.
There was one of the first hotels there. When I was the first time I was there in the 90s, if I would stand on the balcony and I would look out and I'd see the Cibao Valley, all I would see would be tobacco ranches everywhere, to my left and to my right, as far as the eye can see. Now I see two, because it's gone. Buildings are coming up. People are growing yucca. People are growing other cash crops. So that's gone. It's gone forever, because the knowledge that person has is not going to pass it on to anybody. We've lost that cycle in between. So that's one way that I see that we should be more aware of.
And have you also, or can you share an idea as to what could be a way to go about it differently, to think about it differently, and to work towards a more sustainable premium cigar and tobacco industry there?
I've thought about it a long time. You know, the French and the Italians are very marketing savvy with their wines. There's Americans that go to actually pay to do the vendange, to pick up the grapes, so that they can have a process in how the wine is made and they can see it. That's something that could be done. We could get these gentlemen to come and assist in a tobacco growing cycle, assist in the factories, make friends with the roller, with the supervisors, with the guys that are stripping the lathes, and get their Google number, get their WhatsApp, send them a pair of jeans from the States. You know, I'm not asking for any money because, it's not for me, but it would bring a connection between the consumer and the people that are actually making the cigars. I'm the idea behind it, but I'm not sitting on a table sweating 8 hours a day rolling a cigar for you. And these guys deserve it.
Very interesting point there. Very good point. Mace, you had another one. Sorry, I just saw your hand there.
Yeah, no, I just literally just put it up. It's actually really interesting that you just mentioned that, Philip, in terms of changing how you get people out there and how you get the group of people that are here out there. I guess the question that I've got there, though, is the challenge that you've got, and sort of I'm going to put it back on you, is you've got the cost. So as an example, you've got Ian just recently put me onto the Nicaraguan cigar sort of, I'm not going to say festival, that's taking place in about a month's time, or no, in next year. And one of the things is that it's a cost, right? So it's how do you balance up the cost? How do you get people in at a cost that's manageable, but also that helps at a local level sort of drive that knowledge and drive the experience, So it's kind of like, how do you balance the two out? And how can you guys, how can the Fuentes, how can the Padrones, how can, all these guys help out in terms of actually spreading that message out and getting more people into it, but also really deep into it, not just come out here, smoke the cigars and fly back home, but really do more and make it value for money. Is there a way of doing that? Is there a way of balancing those costs?
I don't think anyone has found that out yet. Unfortunately, a lot of cigars are sort of a man's thing. So when people tend to go to these countries, they tend to think that it's a trip to have fun. So they're there, they'll drink, they'll look for female company. They're just out for a good time. So that's, in the past I've seen, that's the mindset a lot of people that are coming there. And God bless them. I mean, they work hard for the money. They want to do what they want. That's fine. But I'm saying for them to get actually interested in it, it's very hard. I haven't come to that thing. Where I'm racking my brains is try to find an alternative solution to packaging, because we're deforesting all these countries, making these cigar boxes, which don't come back to us because the cost is too prohibitive. Fuentes and Padron are trying, but it's very hard. So, that's another thing. We're deforesting the land because we're making cigar boxes that are basically thrown away. So there's a lot of little things that need to be changed. But I'm not big enough, and I don't. It's the politicians. I think that would have to have the desire to try and do something in that sense.
I mean, and you mentioned the politicians, and I guess, and it comes back to, I guess, the industry and the associations and everybody else. But is there more that, as a community, in terms of the manufacturers and producers, can do? I hate the word lobbying. I know it's huge in the U.S. and everywhere else, but is there another way of getting more of that influence to actually make that impact?
Well, there are people. The Pro Cigar in the Dominican Republic is doing a phenomenal job. They hold a festival every year. Nicaragua, as you mentioned, is doing that. Those are great ways for people to do that, to go and see, and they do it. It's not a problem. What happens is that people go there and they're condensed for a week. So what happens? So all of you guys go to Pro Cigar. You're going to be all hanging out with each other, and you're going to be smoking cigars. You're going to be eating the food. You're going to go to visit factories. You're going to visit the field, and it's going to be great. It's going to be a great experience. But you don't have the time to interact because you're going to be shuttled from bus by bus to around. So the more sustainable way to do it is to bring in smaller groups that actually are there from opening hours at 6 in the morning. That's the best cigar. I learned early on when I started working at La Flor de Copan with the gentleman that I mentioned to you, Jorge Bueses. Every morning, he had a phenomenal system which I've copied. Every morning in the conference room, which was a big table, not really a conference room as we know it, was the day before its production. Bits and pieces. So if we produce Churchill that day for this brand or Coronas or whatever, they're on the table. In that morning, he would stop by the office at 6. The manager would be there, the supervisor would be there, any clients would be there, and anybody that happened to be visiting Santa Rosa Copan was welcome. People would go into the office, go there, they'd have a coffee, and they'd smoke a cigar. And then they would all smoke a Corona. And I like it, I don't like it, bit strong, plugged, not good. And this was great because, you had interaction from people that are, because you're not only the same people that are working there every day, but you have people coming in all the time and telling you, and maybe you open up my minds to something that I don't know about. And I've realized with my time in this business, if I produce, if I make a blend of a cigar with a special type of wrapper, it will smoke different in Germany than it will smoke in Honduras or Dominican Republic because of the relative humidity, because of the temperature. So I sometimes, when I used to sell to Germany, I would have to change my blends, knowing that if I wanted to get to an end result, I would have to make it a bit different, even though it was the same cigar, because it's getting it. So these are things. So maybe I have someone from Norway coming into me and say, well, listen, I love your cigars, but in Norway, they burn so fast. We can never enjoy them because, it burns, it dries up, or the wrapper breaks, shrinks, or vice versa. But these are things that it would benefit both of us, which we don't have that. That's one way that I think that it could be a great symbiosis between the consumer and the producer.
Fully agree. Thanks.
And I would hope that certain forums or platforms like the one that we're sharing today could be an opportunity to create more dialogue and create more communication between various groups of the industry.
Without doubt. Without doubt. I think this is great.
Philip, one thing that I was very happy and curious to hear from you is the aspect of sustainable and just alternative packaging in general, because we discussed this to a great extent over the past couple of weeks and months here at the lounge with various other guests. And just last week, we hosted a show together with Futamura Group, who produce all the cellophane film or cellulose film, I should much rather say. And we spoke about that as well. Do you see any interesting concepts, or have you experienced any alternative ways of packaging that you truly think could make an impact or
Not at
replace
this
some
point,
of the affinity and love for the traditional wooden box?
Not at this point. Not at this point. I always thought in Spanish it's called yagua. Yagua is like the covering of the bark of the it's what the Cubans used to traditionally put on top of the bales of tobacco to keep the bales in there. I always thought that could be if one could work it technique wise, soften it up, make it so that one could make it into a container. That might be an option because it's biodegradable and it's something that's been thrown away now. But right now, I don't see anything. I don't see anything. And as you know, the cellophane is just promoting the petrochemical industries around the world because that doesn't do. I'm against cellophane personally, but I understand the shop owners want it because they don't want their cigars damaged. But the cigar is like a sponge, so it breathes in everything of the ambient surrounding. So in a box of cigars, if they're non-cellophane, they're all unifying in taste and aroma because they're all breathing in and out. It's almost a living organism. But the moment you put it in a cellophane, what's it breathing in? Chemical, right? It's not breathing anything. You've stopped it. You froze it, and then you don't have the real cigar. But again, like I said, talking to cigar shop owners, they say, well, people come in, put their fingernails in it, break it, and I understand their position, but it's an interesting dilemma, and I'm sure we'll get around to it. It also has to be light enough so the shipping costs are manageable.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that we learned last week is that the cellophane, the cellulose film, is purely plant material based and actually not petrochemical related in any way, shape, or form. At least what Futamura Group shared with us, and it was very interesting. But I fully agree on the point where it actually stops that natural evolution within a box or within the humidor and the interaction between the various different cigars that you have there, because indeed it's very efficient at keeping certain odors in place and not move around all too much. But I love the idea that you shared about how do you call it? What's
Yagua.
Yagua. I think that could be highly interesting. The question is of how do you actually work with it, and how easily does it hold its shape or form,
Exactly.
and how can you manufacture it into a certain vessel or container that holds the cigars. But very interesting thought. Philip, one final question. Obviously, I had to come up with that because I'm Austrian and I'm here in Vienna. You have a special connection with Austria as well, and indeed, your Petrus line was one of the very first commercialized long filler cigars here in the Austrian market, from what I understand. How about the global spread and the availability of Felipe Gregorio in general? Because we also had questions over on Facebook as to whether your cigars are available in the UK and certain other countries. So maybe you can share a bit of that.
I'm right now I'm selling in Switzerland, Germany, Poland, that's in Europe. And in Belgium. I'll be starting to sell in Belgium. But I'm not selling in Austria anymore. Unfortunately, I'd love to. It's just I haven't had the time to find the proper distributor. We had mentioned in our previous conversation. It was the first country where I sold cigars to. I sold cigars. My first cigars was sold to Lebanon during the Civil War, and the second mass produced where I was selling all the time was to Austria Tobacco. And with the Petrus line in 5 packs of wood.
Why Austria? How did that come along?
I had a rep that, well, I'll go back. My first sale of cigars was to the Vatican duty-free shop. When I worked for the U.S. government, I worked as a courier between bringing messages back and forth from the Vatican to the United States. So I had a close tie with the Vatican, with people there. So when I started making cigars, I called my cigar Petrus, and I took the keys of the Holy See and the phrase, "On this rock I will build my empire." So I started from that. And then also because I had a gentleman by the name of Wolfgang Kornfeld who lived in Kitzbühel, who was introduced to me, and he volunteered to try to help me distribute my cigars, and he managed to get me in Austria. And my father was actually Austrian origin.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a good mixture. I mean, like myself, I always say I'm a traditional Viennese mixture of everything that the Habsburg monarchy had to offer. So there you go. Philip, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show, and thanks for everything.
I meeting all of you. Sorry I didn't get to speak to all of you, but please feel free to reach out to me whenever you want. I'm always available.
It was wonderful to have you with us, and again, thanks for everything that you shared. Truly inspiring, and what a track record! What an incredible history that you have in this wonderful world. I hope that today's show was one of the opportunities to get your message and your experience across to many more people, and also to some of the young enthusiastic consumers that probably haven't heard that many of the stories that you have to tell, and the wonderful experiences that you have to share. So it's been an absolute privilege for me, and I want to thank you for the opportunity and for joining us today. It was really interesting, very informative, and a great segment. Thank you from heart.
It was my pleasure. And I want to tell all of you, cigars are the greatest equalizer in the world. In this day and age where there's so much diversity, so many different poles pulling us apart, all you need to do is sit down with someone and share a cigar, and you'll see that you will have an immediate connection. So use your cigars to spread the word.
Amen.
Take care, huh? Thank you, guys.
I couldn't think of a better sentence to close this show today, Philip. Thank you from heart. All the very best.
Bye-bye.
Light 'em up.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks,
Bye.
Philip.
Thank you, Philip.